and Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. And he has been in many important positions in the environmental field. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. So I'd like to say a few words. First about our university. As you may already know, Rio de Janeiro Federal University is the largest Brazilian federal university. We've got something around 46,000 undergraduate students, 18,000 graduate students, 175 undergraduate courses, 119 graduate courses, and we have many different campi along Rio de Janeiro city and in 2 cities of the interior. We're the second Brazilian university, and we are among the best ones in Latin America according to different ranking systems. We are very happy to receive here people from other Brazilian universities, and we welcome everybody who is here, everybody who came from different countries, and our Brazilian friends. I'd like to call the attention to the importance of Rio de Janeiro in the environmental field. It was here that the summit of 1992 took place, the United Nations Summit for the Environment. And 20 years later, another meeting, so Rio plus 20, took place here too. So Rio is sort of a symbol. It was here that the concept of the agenda, the world agenda was created. The concept of sustainable development was reinforced here in the 1992 summit, Rio Summit. I'd like to call the attention that, to the fact that Brazil plays an important role in the environmental field. So we've got sort of a clean energy matrix. We've got many challenges such as deforestation, but the country has much potential, and we expect that this conference will help us to face these challenges. I would also like to call the attention to the concept of sustainable development. This was a very important concept that is being reinforced in the latest years by the Paris Summit, after the Paris Summit of the Paris Agreement of 2015. And that's a concept that we'd like to reinforce and to keep it working. So we expect that this conference might be a strong step forward towards the consolidation of such a concept. It's something that we are to work hard on, to not to make development just a possibility, but a necessity that is to be followed by all countries in the world. So I would also like to announce the decision we made to create a Brazilian branch of SDEWES, of the Center for Sustainable Development of Energy, Water, and Environmental Systems. So we'll have now a Brazilian branch of this important organization. So I'd like to pass the floor now to Professor Eduardo Mack, Director of the Chemical Engineering School, who is also hosting the conference. So, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Eduardo Serra. Dear participants of this opening table, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of School of Chemistry, in Portuguese, Escola de Química, I welcome all participants of this meeting, declaring that it is an honor to our academic unit to host the technical activities of the first Latin American SDEWES conference. Just to show some features of our School of Chemistry. It is the academic unit of the Technological Center of our university. We are in charge of 4 undergraduate courses: Chemical Engineering, Bioprocesses Engineering, Food Engineering, and Industrial Chemistry, and 2 programs for graduate students: Chemical and Biochemical Process Engineering Program and Sharing with Polytechnical School Environmental Engineering Program. We have almost 1,500 undergraduate students and 600 graduate students. We are today almost 80 professors with PhD degree, developing basic and applied research in many areas correlated to our current activities. Finally, I wish you all a very pleasant stay in our technology center, and also that the discussions bring new horizons to your research. Good conference, and thank you. Em português, boa conferência e obrigado.
Thank you. I'd like to pass the floor to Professor Zvornin Kuzovic. I hope I have pronounced it correctly. Yeah? So please.
It's my presentation, please. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you to the first Latin American Conference on Sustainable Development.
Closer to the microphone, please.
Please. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Dear colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you to the first Latin American Conference on Sustainable Development of Energy, Water and Environment System. In my name and on behalf of Faculty of Mechanical Engineering and Naval Architecture, University of Zagreb. The Faculty of Mechanical Engineering and Naval Architecture on behalf of University of Zagreb is one of the conference organizers. Let me just say a few words about the University of Zagreb and the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering and Naval Architecture. The University of Zagreb, founded in 1669, is the oldest and the biggest university in Southeast Europe. Modern university is since October 1874. University now consists of 30 faculties and 3 academies and has about 63,000 students and 7,000 employees. I would like to convey you all warm greetings and wishes for a successful conference of the Rector of University of Zagreb, Professor Damir Boras. The Faculty of Mechanical Engineering and Naval Architecture is founded in 1990. Now faculty consists of 14 departments, 42 chairs and 51 laboratories and has about 400 employees and 2,400 students. No doubt, Rio de Janeiro will be a superb and stimulating setting for both scientific and social aspects of this conference. I am sure that you will enjoy not only the technical presentation and valuable scientific discussion, but also the local hospitality, food, culture, and sightseeing. Finally, in Rio de Janeiro, the sustainable development started with the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in 1992, also known as the Rio Summit, Rio Conference. I wish all of us a successful conference. Thank you very much for your coming and for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. I'd like to give the floor to Professor Marcos Almeida, President of our Rio de Janeiro State Institute for the Environment, INEA.
Good morning to you all. Good morning to my friends at the table. I'll try to do my best in English. It's been a long time since I don't practice, but I think I can manage. I'll just go on brief words. I don't have a presentation, but I'd like to speak in the name of the state, having been head of this institution, INEA, which, if you don't know, is one of the first environment organizations, state organizations in Brazil, dating back to the early 70s when we were called FEMA, and with a long term of services to the environment protection. I'd like to first congratulate the SDEWES organization, which I didn't know until having been invited to this event, but I've searched a little bit in the internet, and I understand has a long-term services for the environment. And I also like to congratulate the university for having accepted this partnership with them, and now knowing that you're going to be like their ambassadors in Brazil, which is also good. We have been encouraging since the beginning of my term in INEA, this partnership with the academy. I personally understand that, especially in these times, we have to more and more approach and be together with the academy, with the other entities from civil organizations, in order to do a good job in this difficult task, which is harmonizing the needs of the human beings and the conservation of nature. This is an everyday job. Every hour, I would say it's a 24-hour job, because it is not simple to harmonize both of these expectations. And I think the partnerships now between academy and the state in every organ is very welcome. And I'm glad to say that here at the university, UFRJ, we have a very good partnership I'd like to mention. And if I have an opportunity later, I'll bring a presentation for you all to know, which is a program called Olho no Verde, which in English would be Eye in the Green. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but this is a result of a partnership between INEA, a university, and a private company. And these resources are originated from a compensation from their activity, which is a logistic portuary activity in the north of Brazil, Porto do Açu, if any of you know. It's a 2.8 million reais project. And now this program, which has been going on since the beginning of last year, enable us to follow up suppression, vegetation suppression in our state in a much more intelligent way, so we don't necessarily have to have people out in the field all the time, since we don't have enough people, and now we have the use of technology. This partnership is here with the Laboratory of Geography, and the way it works is there's the companies of the radar, the satellite companies, they scan images on a weekly basis and make comparisons. These comparisons are made here at the Geography Lab to indicate possible events of forest suppression. And based on these images, our people from INEA go directly to the places where we indicate that there might have been a suppression, which is making our job much more effective. And like I say all the time when I have a chance to speak to the public, I understand now in Brazil we have to learn, we the public services have to learn to make more with less. And when you need to do that, there's no other way other than bringing intelligence to your daily tasks. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the university for this partnership, which is being very good, very efficient in bringing very good results for control of the environment impacts in our state. Basically, I think in all fields, most than everyone, environment is one that we need more and more to have these partnerships. We need to have all the countries together lined up to come up with solutions for this difficult task, to harmonize these interests, which not always are looking at the same direction. And I would like to thank for the opportunity to be here. Unfortunately, I would like to excuse myself because in about 1 hour I'll have to leave for other important problems. The day-to-day job at the environment public organ is not very easy, so I really wish I could spend more time in the academy and learning with every one of you. But today I'll have to leave a little bit earlier, so I'm already excusing myself. And again, wishing everyone a good meet and a prosperous future for this partnership between SDEWES and the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Marcos. I'd like to give the floor to Professor Heitor Gurgulin. You may use this microphone that is with Marcos. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you from outside Brazil to Rio de Janeiro. But remember, Brazil is not only Rio de Janeiro. Brazil is a very big country. I come from Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and I hope some of you, after the conference, if you have some time, you should take a look, not only in Brasilia, but also in the Amazon area, Iguaçu Falls, some beautiful places that we have in Brazil. Anyway, I want to first of all express my thanks to Professor Eduardo Serra and his colleagues from the University Federal of Rio de Janeiro for organizing and hosting us here during the next 3 days. And also I have a special wish to thank Professor Nevin Duke for his kind invitation for me to welcome you all here to the SDEWES Conference, first Latin American conference. I also wish to thank Professor Ivo Slaus, who was my predecessor as the president of the World Academy of Art and Science, for suggesting me that I should come from Brasilia to Rio de Janeiro to participate in this great conference. My distinguished colleague Ivo Slaus attended and also spoke at many past SDEWES conferences held in Europe in the last few years. And he just sent me a message yesterday from Professor Ivo Gary, and he wanted to convey to his support from SDEWES to an initiative that the World Academy is organizing in Southeastern Europe in the next few years. But allow me to give you a view, being a welcome speech to all of you about what's happening in Brazil. As you know, I'm very happy to be here at COPE. COPE, we're commemorating 50 years very shortly. And I'm happy to be here because I was a good friend and supporter of the founder of COPE, Professor Alberto Luiz Coimbra, in the early days. I used to be in Washington, D.C. at the Organization of American States. We had a program of exchange of scientists, and Professor Coimbra wanted to have support to visit universities, graduate schools, programs of engineering in the United States. We supported him, and later, Professor Frank Tiller from the University of Houston, who also came here, decided to organize the first graduate engineering program, chemical engineering program, in March 1963. So it's been a long time that the program was organized, and we helped bring 2 visiting professors to teach at that particular course at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro at the creation of COPE. Because, as you probably know, this is, no doubt, the best engineering center that we have in Brazil. My special privilege also is to be here because most of you being engineers, let me give you some information on engineers and also some data on our country. As you probably know, the population of Brazil has overcome 209 million people this year. So we have a big economy. We are among the 10 largest economies in the world. The per capita of Brazil today is over $15,000. Of course, we have tremendous inequalities within the country that you should be aware of. All you have to do is look at the beautiful sites of Rio de Janeiro and look at the slums which are located in the best places of the city where you have beautiful views. But that's a big challenge that we have, is a challenge for the younger generation that is here and all of governmental authorities to solve. We have 195 universities in Brazil and 149 university centers. We are not as old as the University of Zagreb, 1669. The first university created in Brazil is this university right here. It was called before the University of Brazil, and it was created on paper in 1920 by our president, because we are going to receive a former president from Europe, and the university had to offer him a honoris causa degree. So that's why the University of Brazil was created in 1920, joining 3 faculties: Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Law, and Faculty of Medicine. So engineering school was already here, much before the university was officially created. But since that time, let me tell you, we have, in addition to these universities and university centers that I mentioned, we have 1,980 isolated faculties, which are schools, including schools of engineering, spread throughout the country. And frankly speaking, the enrollment of these universities is over 8 million students. And we are graduating about 1 million students every year throughout the country. Particularly in engineering, we have already 600,000 engineers registered in Brazil. And 40,000 engineers are graduated annually from all the engineering schools and universities in this country. In spite of that, frankly speaking, about 1/2 of those engineers are civil engineers. It looks like a big number, although we still need more engineers in our country. Our postgraduate system of engineering that COPE did a fantastic work in the early 60s is producing today about 20,000 doctor's degrees a year and about 49,000 master's degrees. 2,000 of those degrees are particularly in engineering for doctor's degrees, and about 6,800 in engineering also for master's degree, which means the number of engineers is growing, the number of engineers with master's degree and doctor's degrees is increasing, and in spite of that, we have to realize that we must do further efforts throughout the country, because most of these degrees are offered in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, the state of Minas Gerais, the largest states, more economic development in Brazil. But I should tell you, we have to think of the scientific and technological research community in Brazil. We have over 300,000 scientists, technologists working throughout the country, of which 110,000 have doctor's degrees. 143,000 have master's degrees, and 43,000 have only a bachelor's degree. So there's been a fantastic growth in the scientific community in Brazil in the last 20 years, to say the least. So if you think of that, that means the scientific production, scientific papers published in international journals and in journals in Brazil has been growing a lot. So that in 2015, I had the data from the National Research Council, 60,000 papers were published. It represented 53% of all Latin America scientific production, including, of course, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, the largest ones, but also the other countries. And I'm glad to see that there are some representatives of other Latin American countries here in this conference. And I'm sure all of them are working to increase their production. Frankly speaking, we have 2.57% of all papers published in the world. That's a very impressive number now. But unfortunately, we don't have a great number of patents. In other words, we have papers, scientific papers, we are growing, but not so much on patents in our country. So this is a big challenge because most of our scientific work is funded by the government, and we should try to increase funding from private enterprise and companies that should support scientific and technological research. We must increase the participation of private sector. As I said, it's still very small in Brazil. But in this country, we have 27 states. 27 states, of which Rio de Janeiro is one of them. São Paulo is another one. I could name all the others. But these 27 states, each state has created a foundation for support of scientific and technological research. But just to give some example, in 2015, the state of São Paulo, with an investment of 7.7 billion reals, local money, and the state of Rio with 920 million, if you add the two of them, they had more money than the rest of the country for support of scientific and technological research. So we also need the problem how to decentralize the system to other states in the country. But nevertheless, if I can mention this because it's a good case, we are trying to increase providing support because these foundations provide support for research, training, fellowships in Brazil and abroad. We had a very large fellowship program going on until 2 years ago, but we must continue this effort. And this is done to the National Research Council, which is located in Brasilia, also to CAPES, an organization of the Ministry of Education. So we need to increase these programs. Brazil still do not participate internationally. As you see, Korea, China, India have close to 100,000 students studying in the United States in graduate programs of engineering. Not all of them in engineering. Brazil had less than 8,000. So there's a fantastic gap in the training of more scientists, engineers, for our scientific and technological development. Frankly speaking, in 2016 and 2017, 2 years ago, a funding crisis has hit Brazil. A funding crisis that affects particularly the science and technology community, the university system, higher education system in the country. So we have had problems the last 2 years. And frankly speaking, although last year we see beginning change in the economy in Brazil, we had last year, 2017, the largest surplus of exports and imports into the country. Although we had this fantastic result, which was one of the best of the last many years, the Congress has approved the budget for this year, 2018. And unfortunately, we're still going to have shortage of funds for the university system and for research and technological, scientific and technological research. But if you think of reality, we are hopeful, and the government is very hopeful, that next month our Congress will approve a major reform of the pension system. Because the pension system this year has provided a deficit budget of 280 billion reals. It's about almost $80 billion, to show the magnitude of this. So if Congress approves this next month, we will improve the possibilities for the future, probably decreasing this deficit. And then there will be more money again for science, technology, and higher education in the country. Let me give you some numbers also here. How much do we, in proportion of our GDP, we put in science and technology? In 2017, last year, Brazil, and looking at the comparison to other Latin American countries, Brazil leads the numbers 1.24% of the GDP for science and technology development. Argentina, 0.58, Mexico, 0.5, Chile, 0.36, Uruguay, 0.32, Colombia, 0.23. I'm just giving you an order of magnitude, but it shows that we still need to improve on that. Just to give you a comparison, again, the same year, Korea, 4.2%, Japan, 3.4%, Germany, 2.7%, United States, 2.7%, France, 2.2%, China, 2.06%, and Russia, 1.13%. So you can see that Brazil still is very much below the developed countries in Asia and Europe. So we must do more effort to increase the percent of the GDP that we invest for science and technology. Okay, I give you a lot of numbers, probably you don't remember them, but I wanted to give an idea. What is the scenario today when you look at Brazil and Latin America, not to compare with Europe and Asia? So the Swedish case here is a very important one. But I would like to mention to you some developments that the engineering community has done in our country. And I don't know that you know them, so I decided to choose 3 cases to mention to you. First one, I'm an older person. I started my long teaching career when I was a young 22, teaching physics for engineering students at the famous Institute ITA in Brazil, Aeronautical Institute of Technology in São José dos Campos in 1950. And we graduated very good aeronautical engineers after 5 years, of course. And then, after 14 years, the first graduates of this engineering school decided to start a commercial airline company. It's called Embraer. You probably heard of this name. Embraer has been a very successful enterprise over the last 50 years almost. And as you know, all over the world, Embraer planes are flying. In Europe, quite a lot of them. Embraer last year exported $3.5 billion thanks to the efforts of the engineers which decided to work there. Government supported that initially, but now it's a private company. So this is a good example how engineering has contributed to an important dimension of the Brazilian economy. We produce airplanes, but we don't produce Brazilian cars. That's one challenge that we have in our country. I'll give a second example. Agronomic engineers. We had a famous researcher Dr. Joanna Dobereiner, which you may not have heard of her, but she was doing experimental work in a farm located very here, near to Rio de Janeiro. In 1974, this lady was working for a company called Embrapa, Brazilian Enterprise for Agricultural Research. She discovered plants and bacteria which fix nitrogen in other plants. That was a simple experiment she did. She experimented more. Finally, she produced papers on that, and the company has spread the news. She was working with soybeans. Soybean is a very popular plant in Brazil. Today we are the world's largest exporter of soybeans, and also other coffee, sugar. So finally, I should mention that we have a fantastic growth in the agricultural sector in Brazil. But over this last 50 years, saving of imports of fertilizers gave benefit to Brazil, $1.5 billion a year over the last 50 years. It's a fantastic contribution. And in this case, we are also the largest world exporter of cattle meat. And cattle eats grass, which is mostly developed in the north part of Mato Grosso and in the Amazon region. It's a fantastic problem for Brazilian environmental development because we want to decrease the cutting of the trees in the Amazon, deforestation. Fortunately, it's coming down, but not yet completed. So we have a major challenge ahead for us. Let me give you the third case. The third case of engineering development work that I wish to mention is right here, COPE. COPE was started, as I mentioned, in the 1960s by Professor Alberto Coimbra, starting chemical engineering course. But that was outside the engineering school of the university in those days. That's why it's called COPE, okay? Coordination of program, graduate programs in engineering in Brazil. COPE was established here. It started cooperation with an oil company called Petrobras in 1977. It's been some years now. And using the university facilities and hiring the professors, the engineers from the university. Thanks to these efforts, joint efforts, thousands of projects were developed over these 50 years. Later on, in 1993, Fundação Copetec, which is hosting us at this event, was created and also provided support and cooperation with Petrobras for the development of more than 600 projects. Petrobras is Brazil's major state oil company, and it has an excellent research center, SEMPES, which is very near here to this campus. So, fantastically, SEMPES has professionals, researchers. Half of the professors and the researchers working there were graduated from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. So, I could give you more examples. Even in my own university, Federal University of São Carlos, in 1970, we created a Department of Ecology, 1970, with Professor Tundizi. And thanks to that, that was before the United Nations Stockholm Conference. So that I could give more examples of engineering and related to environment that many institutions in Brazil have been doing the last few years. I therefore firmly believe that more developments can and will be achieved by many of our doctors, masters, and bachelors doing active research in many universities in several places in our country and throughout Latin America, and in closer collaboration with public and private enterprise. Finally, I wish to highlight that the important presence of your here and your papers and your statements to this conference will also challenge more of our researchers, professors, engineers, and institutions to focus their attention on these very important issues of sustainable development of energy, water, and environmental systems. I also hope that more SDEWES conferences will take place in Latin America. We have some participants from other countries in Latin America here, but we should have much more. And I hope that this will come with more events of this kind taking place in other countries of our region. Brazil has, with all the countries, strong desire to achieve the ambitions of COP21. And we also have signed the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. There are, though, still many challenges ahead of us. I wish you all a very successful conference, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Heitor, for the lecture, which gave us lots of, bits of information. And now I'd like to pass the floor to our Ambassador Eduardo Prisco.
Thank you, Professor Serra, and thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. On behalf of the Brazilian government, I would like to warmly welcome you all to the conference, especially those who came from abroad. I was really impressed going through the roost of universities that make part of this SDEWES, I think it's SDEWES. How do you say it? But it's a very interesting concept, and I am sure that having a chapter now in Rio de Janeiro will really foster environmental studies in this country. And I don't need to tell you about the links between Rio de Janeiro and environment issues. Professor Serra have already done this. But let me tell you something. 42 years ago, when I joined the Brazilian Foreign Service, the environment was a tiny issue at the bottom of a long list of issues that were dealt by that were on the agenda of the Divisão das Nações Unidas, which translates into United Nations Division, that belonged to the Departamento de Organismos Internacionais, Department for International Organizations. Environment was not a big issue on the diplomatic agenda. We had 2 years before the Earth Conference at Stockholm, the first environmental conference, but it was not really something that were on the forefront of the, let's say, the diplomatic discussions on the world. 20 years later, we have already a division of environment, and 10 years later, we had a whole department of environmental issues. At that point, we had the Rio Summit in 1992, where the concept of sustainable development was really established. When I joined the service, no one had any idea what the sustainable development was all about. And then we had the Rio Plus 20, and then the Paris Treaty of last year, 2016. And environment is really on the forefront of the diplomatic agenda. The countries are all worried about it, rightly so, I would say, but this was a major change that I witnessed it throughout my professional life. So I'm really impressed by having a chapter of Swedes here in Rio, and I think that this kind of network between so many different universities from all over the world will really boost research on the subject. We really badly need this. And so I just want to wish you all a very successful conference, and hope that studies on the environment will really grow after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'd like to give the floor to our Vice Rector, today representing the Rector, Professor Denise Nascimento.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Rio de Janeiro Federal University, it's with much pleasure that I welcome all the authorities who are present here at this opening ceremony of all participants of the first Latin America Conference of Sustainable Development of Energy, Water, and Environment Systems. We are very proud to host this conference promoted by the SDEWES, a leading organization in the environment field, which includes many students, professors, and researchers of UFRJ and other important Brazilian universities and research institutes, as well as members of public agencies and enterprises. Our university is the largest Brazilian federal university and is placed among the best universities of Brazil and Latin America. At UFRJ, many research groups from different areas dedicate themselves to the environment field. We have both undergraduate and graduate courses with this area. The environment is part of our priorities. Researchers of Rio de Janeiro Federal University have been participating in the Conference of Parties and the other relevant international forums. As an institution, we managed to contribute to analysis and the proposition of solutions for Brazilian environment problems, as we did after the disruption of the mining company Samarco's dump in the city of Mariana in November 2015, and to face the environmental changes faced by the country, such as the deforestation problems. We wish that First Latin America SDEWES Conference may contribute not only for the development of scientific and technological research on the environment field, but also to create and consolidate institutional and professional ties between Brazilian experts and institutions and our international partners on the way to sustainable development. All success for the conference. Enjoy your stay in Rio and at Rio de Janeiro Federal University. Thank you. Have a nice conference.
Thank you, Professor Denise. And now I'll give the floor to the President of SDEWES, Professor Neven Duic.
Thank you, Eduardo. Many speakers talked about Rio 1992, but what led to Rio 1992 was the UN report of Brundtland Commission, and let us see what happened since then. It was 31 years ago. How do I make this move? No? And important message of that report was that we cannot look at things separately. We have to look at integrated sustainable development as something that is integrated over different fields. We have to take into account food, energy, resources, industry, human settlement, loss of species, lots of genetic resources, increase of population. And without this holistic view, we cannot solve the problem of sustainable development. So what has been done since then is that we have done quite a lot of research. We have come to good definitions of sustainable development, but we still didn't do much on the real issues of improving sustainability. There is some success in energy transition, but sustainable trends continue. Fortunately, we have goals. We have set Millennium Goals, which were mostly implemented by 2015, and we are now running towards Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. What did we do in that period of time? Well, demography is improving, but we are still growing populationally. And it's difficult because all these new people need resources, more resources. We have tackled poverty quite well. The absolute poverty has really fallen down a lot in last 30, 40 years, but there is still a lot of poverty which is not absolute poverty. So we will have that problem continuing. Also, we will need much more food for the growing number of people. And we used most of land that is available to us. And the number of people is growing, they're getting richer, they want to eat meat. So we need the green revolution, a new green revolution. Also, energy demand is still growing relatively quickly. We have two important trends starting. One is energy neutral buildings. We should actually make buildings not use energy or produce energy. And also electrification of transport. Only that can tackle demand increase. We have done much more on the supply of renewable energy. The trend in Europe is completely turning towards wind and solar. And also, if you look at the global level, 2/3 of investment in energy is now clean energy. But this should be 100%. We should not anymore invest in fossil fuel for producing electricity, because we can do that by renewables. Unfortunately, if you look at the energy supply of the primary energy, the part of renewables is this small sliver, yellow sliver on the top. So we are still very far from success. One of the issues that we have to tackle are huge subsidies to fossil fuel industries, which are approximately 50 times higher than subsidies to renewables. So of course there is a huge barrier to energy transition still in front of us. But we have to hurry up, because the total budget, carbon budget that we can spend before burning the earth is actually quite spent. We have already spent 2/3 of the budget if we want to keep temperature only 2 degrees above the historical levels. If we want to do what Paris has decided, 1.5 degrees, then we have to practically stop using fossil fuels today. If we look at the curve, the blue one is 2 degrees. It looks like we have to actually stop using fossil fuels quite soon. That will be very difficult, but we have to try at least. The good news is that the global CO2 emissions are leveling now. But that is mainly because China has started to reduce the use of coal. And we hope that this trend will continue quickly, because they have lots of CO2 emissions. There is a Paris process now. Paris Agreement has been ratified by many countries, including Brazil, of course, and European Union. We hope that this process can actually enable tackling climate change more quickly. But what has been promised in Paris is very far from what we need for 2 degrees. It's more like 3.4 degrees. So what are the causes of the problems for sustainable development? Well, we didn't really follow the Brundtland report. We didn't look at it holistically. Mainly we tackled the climate change as the proxy for sustainable development, but we have to include also all other issues. The Washington consensus that a position that rich means more sustainable, it's not necessarily proven after 30 years. So we will probably have to find some better ideas. Also, developed countries have not met commitments to developing countries, generating an atmosphere of distrust. This is creating also problems. Sustainable development has not been able to find the political entry points to make real progress. And fossil fuel subsidies are huge and should be quickly dismantled, but for that we need political support. We should move quickly. We need new green economy revolution, new agricultural revolution. We need to install polluter pays principle, circular economy. Efficiency has to be regulated because there is a market failure about it, and policies that use energy transition to create jobs should be supported. We have our goals, 17 goals for sustainable development, and this conference is, we could say, tackling 4 of them quite deeply, so we can help this process. I will now say a few words where this conference is actually related to Brundtland's report. The important thing why we started this conference is because we understood that the traditional division of engineers, chemical, mechanical, electrical engineers, economists aside, is not working well for sustainable development. We want to bring all these engineers, economists, sociologists together to work together on solutions. This conference has gathered 190 participants, which is very good because this is the first conference in Latin America from 35 countries, 84 cities, and 100 universities. We have several countries from Latin America, starting of course from Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Peru and Suriname, and also other countries from the rest of the world. But the conference started in 2002, following the need to look at the sustainable development from the integrated approach, because you cannot solve it only from in one profession. We have to work together. And it has proved quite a successful series of conferences, and that is why we decided to start a new series with help of Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. You can see the numbers through history. We are approaching around 500-600 participants per year. Every second year we organize it in Dubrovnik in Croatia. And every second year we are organizing it in different regions, regional conferences. So I hope we will come back to Latin America in 2020 also. Also, an important thing is that we have very good relations with leading journals, but I will talk about that more at the closing session. So you have to come to the closing session. We also started a journal, which is now in Scopus and Web of Science. So you can also publish your holistic integrated research in this journal. Also we have several new channels of communication. So please use them. Tweet, use Facebook. Also put pictures. When you put pictures, tag SDEWES Center at Facebook. This session is going online on YouTube. So also follow our YouTube channel. And please participate in social networks turning around SDEWES Center. There will be important thing is that the papers must be presented by the presenting author. If that is not so, then we cancel the paper. We want to have a presenting author actually presenting the paper. We want especially young people to practice their presentation skills. This is very important. So please change the presenting author if you are intending to do that. There will be an award session for the best paper at the conference dinner. So please come to the conference dinner. And there will be a group photo session, I hope today, and also at the conference dinner. And now I would like to mention just one organizational thing. A coffee break will be served in a registration room. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.